Imagine for a moment that death simply vanished. Not just for you, but for every single living being on Earth. No more aging, no sickness, no final breath. Humanity locked forever in its current state. No goodbyes, no endings. What would that truly mean for us and for the world we inhabit? On the fateful morning of what would become known as Day 1, the impossible happened. Across every continent, in every hospital, in every corner of the globe, the last gasp was never taken. The final heartbeat never faded. People on the brink, defying all medical logic, simply stabilized. The elderly stopped aging. The sick found themselves in an inexplicable stasis, neither recovering nor succumbing. Initially, it was a whisper, a rumor spreading through digital networks like wildfire. Then it became an undeniable, earth-shattering reality. Death, the oldest constant, was no more. The planet erupted in a frenzy of joy. In great metropolises like New York City, Tokyo, and London, streets overflowed with spontaneous celebration. Strangers embraced, tears of elation streaming down faces. The news anchors, initially bewildered, eventually joined the chorus. We beat death. The night sky, from the bustling markets of Marrakesh to the quiet villages nestled in the Himalayas, blazed with fireworks, a universal declaration over our ancient foe. For the first few days, humanity lived in an unparalleled utopian fantasy. The fear of loss, the grief of separation, all seemingly banished. Every sunrise was a promise of infinite tomorrows, every moment a chapter in an endless story. But as Day 7 dawned, the jubilant headlines began to darken. Doctors, once hailed as heroes for this miracle, now stood baffled, their instruments unable to register a single new fatality. Priests and philosophers, whose entire frameworks were built around life and death, whispered in hushed, increasingly worried tones. The online jokes about eternal memes started to turn frantic. Not one obituary had been published for a week. Not one. The initial euphoria, like a sugar rush, began to wear off, replaced by a strange, unsettling quietude. By month 1, a peculiar inertia had settled over humanity. The systems designed to sustain life, paradoxically, began to buckle. Nobody was truly hungry. Nobody needed sleep. The body, eternally maintained, found its own bizarre equilibrium without it. Factories, once humming with the relentless rhythm of production, started to slow. Why manufacture goods if there was no consumption cycle, no replacement needed? Why toil in the fields if food, once harvested, simply sat, impervious to decay, its freshness eternal, but its purpose waning as appetites dulled? Money, that great motivator, the very lubricant of civilization, began to feel meaningless. The fundamental premise of work, of striving, of progress, it had always been underpinned by the finite nature of existence, by the need to build, create, and secure a future before time ran out. But when time was endless, what then? The intricate dance of supply and demand, the driving force of all human economy, dissolved. Society, built on the premise of mortality and succession, found its gears grinding to a halt because life was now automatic, an unending, unchanging state. The initial thrill of immortality quickly gave way to a profound sense of stagnation. Imagine reaching every peak, exploring every valley, mastering every skill. For the first few years, this was intoxicating. You hiked Mount Everest twice, then thrice. You traversed the Amazon River, navigated the Sahara Desert, dived the deepest trenches of the Pacific. Each adventure, once a monumental achievement, became just another item checked off an ever-diminishing list. The joy of discovery, the thrill of the unknown, slowly faded into the mundane. Winning, that intoxicating rush of triumph, turned hollow. What was the point of a victory if there was no ultimate defeat, no finality to give it weight? Every competition could be replayed, every record broken and rebroken ad infinitum. The struggle, the risk, the preciousness of a single moment of success all evaporated when the clock never stopped. Without the potential for an ending, beginnings ceased to feel special. A new career, a fresh start, a budding relationship. These milestones lost their sparkle when they were merely indistinguishable points on an infinite timeline. Even love, perhaps humanity's most profound and cherished emotion, began to feel heavy. The intensity, the vulnerability, the fierce preciousness of shared moments, these elements derived their power, in part, from the understanding that time together was finite. To love fiercely was to love knowing that every embrace, every whispered secret, every shared laugh was a treasure that might one day cease. But when love was guaranteed to last forever, when every partner, every child, every friend was an eternal fixture, the depth of connection paradoxically thinned. The anticipation of reunion was gone, the bittersweet ache of memory replaced by an endless, unchanging present. Couples who had pledged "till death do us part" now faced "till eternity do us part." What began as a romantic ideal became an unimaginable burden. The petty grievances that might fade with time, the minor annoyances that once seemed trivial, now loomed large, magnified by the crushing weight of their permanence. Imagine being tied to a single individual, unchanging, through millennia. The comfort could become suffocating, the familiarity stifling. The possibility of new connections, new experiences, new loves, all complicated by existing, unbreakable bonds. Divorce, once a painful but necessary severing, became a philosophical quandary. How do you truly separate when you are both eternal? Parenting transformed into an endless cycle of nurturing an eternal child. The joy of watching a child grow, mature, and eventually forge their own path was replaced by the bizarre reality of a child who would never truly leave, never truly mature beyond a certain point, never truly become independent in the traditional sense, for their parents would always be there, forever. The natural order of generations, of legacy, of passing the torch, shattered. Without the cycle of life and death, there was no room for newness, no space for the young to truly define themselves against the backdrop of an evolving society. Innovation, creativity, artistic expression, these too stagnated. Why push boundaries when there was an infinite amount of time to simply repeat what already existed? The urgency of creation, the desire to leave a mark, diminished into an endless, uninspired hum. The driving force behind humanity's greatest achievements, the quiet understanding of a limited lifespan, was gone. 50 years later, Earth was literally choking on life. The miracle of immortality had spiraled into a global catastrophe. Every city, every village, every remote outpost was bursting at the seams. From the sprawling megacities like Lagos and Shanghai to the once tranquil towns along the Norwegian fjords, every habitable space was crammed. Billions upon billions of bodies, each one never aging, never leaving, occupied the same finite space. The planet's ecosystems, already strained by mortal humanity, buckled completely under the weight of an immortal population. Deforestation accelerated at an unimaginable pace as every last tree was felled for housing, for warmth, for the sheer space it occupied. The Amazon rainforest, once the lungs of the earth, was reduced to a patchwork of desperate settlements. The oceans, once teeming with life, were choked with waste, their bounty long since exhausted. There was no ecological reset, no natural cycle of decay and renewal. Everything just was, in an unending, accumulating sprawl. Food production, despite the bizarre decrease in individual hunger, became a logistical nightmare. While humans no longer truly needed to eat in the same way, the psychological desire, the ritual, persisted. And what did they eat? Synthetic nutrients, algae paste, genetically engineered substitutes, grown in vast, sun-deprived underground farms that stretched for thousands of kilometers beneath the dying surface. The beauty of natural landscapes, of vibrant biodiversity, was sacrificed at the altar of raw survival. The air became thick with the accumulated exhaust of millennia, the water systems polluted beyond repair, the very ground compressed by the ceaseless tread of countless unyielding feet. There was no escape, no solace in nature, for nature itself was being systematically consumed and buried under the relentless tide of endless life. Humanity, once conquerors of death, became prisoners of its own success, confined to an ever-shrinking, increasingly degraded living space. The concept of personal space became a cruel joke. Every breath was shared, every movement an infringement on another's existence. The simple act of finding solitude, once a human right, was now an impossible dream, a phantom memory from a forgotten age. 500 years later, humanity wasn't begging for more time, it was begging for a way out, for silence, for an ending. The once celebrated gift had become the ultimate curse. Generations had been born into this impossible reality, their lives an endless vista of the same unyielding present. They knew no other way, yet they felt the crushing weight of its perpetuity in their very bones. The vibrant tapestry of cultures, once so diverse and dynamic, had flattened into a monotonous gray. Without the ebb and flow of new generations, new ideas, new ways of life, the world became a museum of itself, static and suffocating. 1,000 years later, living forever was not just a burden, it was a torture. The human body, though eternally functional, became an inescapable cage. The mind, once a marvel of adaptability and creativity, was utterly exhausted. Imagine every thought you've ever had, every memory you've ever made, every sensation you've ever experienced, endlessly recycled, infinitely replayed, with no prospect of erasure or renewal. The sheer volume of accumulated knowledge and experience became a crushing weight, a cacophony in the mind that never ceased. Sanity itself became a fragile concept. Many succumbed to catatonia, their minds retreating into themselves, unable to process the endless input. Others developed strange, repetitive behaviors, rituals born of a desperate need to find some rhythm, some semblance of meaning in the unending flow. Society segmented into those who embraced a stoic, detached existence, those who constantly sought out increasingly bizarre and dangerous thrills to feel anything at all, and those who simply shut down. The concept of individual identity blurred. When you had lived for centuries, interacting with countless individuals, experiencing every possible permutation of human emotion and conflict, who were you anymore? The unique edges of personality, once sharp and distinct, eroded into a generalized, weary sameness. Every conversation felt like a repetition, every interaction a reenactment of something already experienced, perhaps 1,000 times before. There was no longer a personal story arc, only an endless, flat line. Art and music, once expressions of the human soul, became stagnant. Why create a masterpiece when it would exist forever, alongside every other masterpiece, with no new eyes to truly appreciate it, no new minds to interpret it with fresh perspective? The finite nature of a performance, the preciousness of a fleeting melody, the impact of a painting unveiled for the first time, all lost their power. Everything simply was, forever on display, eternally available, and therefore eternally mundane.
Religion, once a source of comfort and purpose, struggled to adapt. The promise of an afterlife, once a guiding light, became irrelevant. The very concept of a divine plan, of a journey with a beginning and an end, crumbled. Many turned away from faith, seeing only a cruel joke in a God who had given them eternal life without eternal meaning. Others twisted ancient texts, desperately searching for a forgotten prophecy, a hidden caveat that might offer salvation from this endless existence. The greatest fear was not of pain or suffering, but of absolute, utter boredom. An existential weariness that seeped into every cell, every thought, every second of every infinite day. The soul, once vibrant and curious, was not just tired, it was fundamentally done. It longed for stillness, for release, for the sweet oblivion that once seemed the ultimate terror. And in this endless, suffocating existence, humanity finally understood. Death was never our enemy. Death was mercy. It was the ultimate reset button, a soft goodbye that cleared the slate, making room for newness, for growth, for transformation. Without it, freedom turned into an inescapable trap. Life, in its terrifying infinity, ceased to be life at all. It became merely existence, a state of perpetual being without purpose, without meaning, without the bittersweet beauty of transience. Death is the invisible hand that gives shape to our lives, the silent force that lends urgency to our dreams, and the quiet architect of meaning. It is the boundary that defines the field of play, ensuring that every move we make, every choice we embrace, holds genuine weight. Without the knowledge that our time is finite, would we truly strive? Would we create with passion, love with abandon, or forgive with genuine grace?
Consider the seasons. Each one beautiful in its own right, but their true magnificence lies in their succession, their inevitable progression. Winter gives way to spring, spring to summer, summer to autumn. If one season lasted forever, no matter how lovely, it would eventually become monotonous, tiresome. It is the change, the cycle of birth, growth, decay, and renewal that makes the whole earth vibrant. Death is humanity's winter, a necessary pause that allows for the spring of new generations, new ideas, and new perspectives. It is the promise of an end that elevates the journey. The beauty of a flower is magnified by its ephemeral nature. The sweetness of a song is in its final note. Our capacity for joy, for profound love, for daring adventure, all these are sharpened by the ticking clock, by the unspoken understanding that each moment is precious because it cannot be reclaimed. Death is not an absence of life. It is the boundary that makes life possible, that gives it its vibrancy and its meaning. It is the ultimate act of letting go, making space for what is to come. It prevents stagnation, ensures evolution, and provides the ultimate release from the burdens of an unending consciousness. So ask yourself, truthfully, if true immortality, this unending existence, arrived tonight, would you celebrate? Or would the cold, infinite dread of it fill you with an unbearable terror? The greatest gift, the ultimate mercy, might just be the one we feared the most.